into 2025, we still have a correction. 2024, I thought, would be a year where the correction sort of came to an end. I suppose partly that was because it'd gone on rather long time. But I thought maybe we'd become closer to the bottom than we probably were. And I think there are probably some reasons for that. I mean, I think firstly, the correction came because, as the American economist Herbert Stein said, what can't go on forever will stop. And in the fine wine market, it did. Clearly, an awful lot of wines had got to crazy prices, and they needed to reset. I mean, I think there is a limit to price, regardless of scarcity or wealth. It is the case. There's an awful lot of rich people in the world now, and it is also true that a lot of the sort of top wines are highly sought after. But maybe regardless of your ability to afford it, there is a limit to which you will feel comfortable paying for what is essentially just a bottle of wine to go with your meal. So I think that we might have found where that place is. I think the other thing is that the effect of interest rates, as I said last year, does exert gravity on prices. And if you're paying 7% for your money, then the wine has got to double in 10 years, as I said last year. So in the end, if that moderates your feeling about how much things can go up and if they're already starting at a high level, then maybe that's you're not very optimistic that there are further substantial gains to be had from here. So maybe it is that we have to get back to more fundamentals, and there needs to be pricing from the producers and through the value chain, which are much more created on fundamentals, which is essentially the cost of production plus the incentive margin for producing it, plus some amount for prestige. But you have to leave, as used to be the case sort of 30 years ago, you have to leave sufficient money on the table for the market to do its work and to be incentivized to take these wines to maturity. Looking forward, though, I think there are some structural factors which weren't as clear last year as they are today. And I think one of those is demographics. The reality is that in 1982, when actually we started the Bendham, that was the beginning of the baby boomers sort of hitting their stride with a following wind of technology. And they basically drove the fine wine market from the doldrums of the 70s up to the heady heights we saw just after COVID. And the reason I say demographics is destiny is because the reality is that the median baby boomer, which is me, by the way, at 71, it tells you that we're getting old. And if I was to buy en primeur, say I was on the sort of Bordeaux 20-year rule, I'd be drinking the wine in my 90s. Well, that's not going to happen. And we were the largest and richest generation in history. But we're going away, and that is bound to have an effect on the market. And yes, the rest of the world has got rich in the last 50 years, but I'm not sure that's sufficient to compensate, because there's an awful lot more younger people. And again, I think the younger people are going to behave differently to us baby boomers who are used to buying. We were taught to buy en primeur. We were taught to sort of have a cellar. I'm not sure many young people now are interested in the cellar. I don't think they can probably afford the house that goes on top of it. And I think they're going to think very differently about wine. So I think the demographic factor is going to be important. And I think if the baby boomers are too old and the next generation's not yet interested, who's going to buy the new young releases? If neither do, who's going to finance them to maturity? I think we're seeing some structural changes here, which could be quite significant. And digital marketplaces are another structural change. I think they're not another form of e-commerce. I think the bid offer function allows the participants in the market, not just the trade, to establish what the real clearing price is. And I think given that they are they're accessible globally by all participants. I think we'll find increasingly real price discovery, and those prices may be higher, but they possibly may be lower as well. And the margin that is to be gained from the trades that clear will be what they are, and they may not be what the trade wants to set them at. So I think that's I think that is going to make a big difference, and I think a lot of people haven't yet appreciated that. I think they'll deliver greater liquidity, they'll lead to greater velocity, so we'll have much more trading and probably at lower prices, and leading to even better price discovery. The current market structure doesn't deliver a self-reinforcing cycle like that, and I think it will be a game changer. So margins applied by offers, but that don't survive the stress test of the market, will go smaller, and I think that's something we're going to have to think about. I think the other thing is that the next generation are digital natives, and they're used to multiple marketplaces to buy and sell most things in their lives, and I can't think that wine is going to be any different. So I think when we look at the changes in demographics and we look at the advent of real marketplaces, digital marketplaces for fine wine, I think we're moving into a very different era. And I think that transparency, which is essentially what we're seeing from the digital marketplaces, will find out where the value doesn't exist, and will eventually pay for where the value does exist. And it may be that there's going to have to be a lot of change in the business models of us fine wine merchants if we want to thrive in that world. So, my question really is, are we entering the sort of the fine wine's big bang moment? It's interesting that in the post the actual financial big bang, stockbrokers, who I think are a bit like sort of fine wine merchants, mostly were sort of blown away by the platforms and indexes. And it's I think the analogy is quite apt, and I think it's possible that we need to consider that could be, what happened to stockbrokers might happen to fine wine merchants. I think there's another factor which is structural. And I think, finally we're beginning to realize that Brexit, regardless of what one thinks about it as an idea, has actually rendered moving wine in and out of the UK too expensive, too bureaucratic, and storing it is very expensive as well. I mean, I actually have a business now, Nebbie Luce, which is an Italian Piemonte business, but we've now moved that business into Europe, and we're storing the wine in Belgium. But we're storing it at more than 50% cheaper than we could in the UK. We also have access to some of the greatest sort of logistics hubs in the world, in sort of Antwerp, Rotterdam, etc. They're very cost effective, they're very efficient, and they're probably they're longer established than most in the world. So if you want a sort of hub for the future of fine wine, I think it's increasingly looking like it may not be where it historically has been, i.e. the UK. And it's not clear to me why the UK should hold on to its preeminence in the secondary market. So I think that's something that we all have to think long and hard about. Maybe the fine wine trade needs to shift the center of gravity of its stock out of the UK. I mean, we can still trade from here because, of course, that's all digital now. But I think this all adds up to a future that is not going to look like the past. I think to summarize, I think we're looking at I think the correction is more secular than just a sort of confidence one. I think there are lots of factors for that. I think we need to have prices set at more, that maintain some kind of reasonable affordability in wine. Doesn't mean they're going to be cheap, but they can't just go on up forever. There's a point where even the richest person is going to balk at buying them. I think we're going to have to realize that demographics is changing, and the pattern of buying is going to change. It's not terribly clear to me that my kids or other young generations have an appetite for buying wines years before they want to consume them. And to put them in cellars they don't know So I think that's going to change things. And it's also not clear that they're going to be as interested in overpriced Burgundy and Bordeaux and Champagne and what have you. They're probably just as interested in buying something made in the Kviri in Georgia or Slovenia. And I think we need to understand that the new generations might be more might be more adventurous. And I think that again, to summarize, I think that the digital marketplaces are going to offer a huge amount of transparency and a huge amount of information for people to basically do their own buying and selling. And that will change the role of the wine merchant pretty fundamentally, I think. And I think it'll also give the market a lot more confidence in price discovery, because I think price discovery has been one of the real Achilles heels of the trade. We just don't know really what the price is. We kind of make it up as a trade, and the sort of consumers have sort of put up with it. But I think that's about to change. And where that ends up with, I don't know. I mean, the market will, the market and the participants in the market will determine that for us. And I think that the UK's preeminence is, doesn't seem terribly logical. I mean, if the world was starting now, I don't think we put the centre of secondary market trading in the UK. But we will see. Anyway, that's what I think.